In July 2021, amidst a seemingly endless barrage of pandemic misinformation and American political turmoil, an unexpected topic began trending on Twitter: Limp Bizkit. 22 years after their first Billboard #1 album, Significant Other, the flagship act for turn of the millennium disgruntled youth returned, with surprising fanfare and cultural relevance. After nearly 2 decades of popular media obscurity, Limp Bizkit was the standout act of Lollapalooza 2021, one of the most popular music festivals in the United States. Band frontman Fred Durst, wearing a gray wig accompanied by a dusty handlebar mustache and pink-shaded aviator glasses, refers to himself as Dad as the crowd goes wild. Durst's presentation alongside the energetic crowd transforms what might otherwise be a flaccid nostalgia act into something surprisingly self-aware and curiously resonant for a young, modern audience. Limp Bizkit is just the tip of a nu metal resurgence, but what makes a genre that is so specific to turn-of-the-millennium youth culture so resonant today? Flashback. It is almost summer break 1999. Bill Clinton is president of the United States, and the news and late-night television circuit is still largely dominated by his affair with Monica Lewinsky. There are growing societal fears, exacerbated by the media, about the breakdown of modern society, as all consumer electronics may irrevocably fail on New Year's Eve in the phenomenon known as Y2K. What's more, only a few months prior, a school shooting at Columbine High, just outside of Denver, Colorado, sparks a pervasive moral panic focused less on gun violence and cultural trends in America than on the effect of dark and extreme music on suburban youth. Miles away from Denver, in a Canadian classroom, a group of grade 7 students have the seriousness of these events impressed upon us by our teachers. But even then, to our young eyes and ears, none of it really sticks. All we knew was that we were being made to feel bad for things it felt like we had no control over. Class empties out for the last time of the year, and a couple friends get together and do what the movie Mallrats encouraged us to do: go to the mall. As usual, those of us with some allowance money grab a CD or two before walking back to one of our homes to give them a listen. This time, one of us grabbed the new hotness, the just-released Limp Bizkit album, Significant Other. For only a couple weeks, their track Nookie, famously about doing it all for the nookie, had been getting increasing amounts of airplay on our local alternative radio station, 89X, and on Much Music. When we got back home, we put it on, and through a detuned voice, the intro exclaimed, "You wanted the worst, you got the worst." A tagline and mission statement for the hour that was about to come. And we loved it. But I'm pretty sure none of us knew why. But when we listened to it at the time, the record made sense and it felt good. But why? What the hell were we even listening to? At the time, it didn't matter because it just clicked. And jumping back to the present, something about Limp Bizkit and the genre they represent is clicking now. This podcast series is about nu metal and its associated genres of turn-of-the-millennium hard rock and rap rock. After nu metal's rise in the mid-90s and its peak at the turn of the millennium, it had become a maligned genre. In the heavier music circles that became popular after nu metal, there was a long stretch where in the writing process, musicians would often make sure their riffs and beats didn't sound too new, and the rap-infused vocal style, the rap rock contingent of the genre, became passé. But nu metal mattered, and it seems to matter now. And this podcast is about taking a deeper look into what nu metal meant at its height, and what it means now in its strange resurgence on social media, on Spotify, and in concerts across the globe. What about the cultural moment is making the aesthetic, the anger, the aggression, and the melodrama and grime of nu metal stick today?
Welcome to Sonic Subcultures Season 1. I'm one of your hosts, Safa Hashi. Over this series, we'll look at 9 records that represent the range of musical styles that fall under the nu metal banner. Each record represents an aspect of nu metal that's surprisingly finding itself back in the current music landscape. Considering I'm late to the game, I'm wondering how nu metal is back and why. To find some answers, Mark Lejeunesse and I look back at each record, do a deep dive on the content of the record, such as its form, lyrics, and impact. From that, with the help of our differing perspectives, we piece together what each record means now in the present day.
Today we're talking about Limp Bizkit's Significant Other. Safa.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the first episode of our podcast.
I'm super excited.
Yeah, so we're going to start by talking about Limp Bizkit's Significant Other. But first, before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about our relationship to nu metal. Because as we've talked about in the bumper, I am old. Safa is not.
I'm young. Yeah.
And for some reason, we have both come across nu metal and have enjoyed it in various capacities at various times.
I'd say so, yeah.
And the genre's back. So what does this mean to us? So you heard a little bit about me in the intro and where nu metal really came in, although it was around before, although I wasn't into it, right? So in my grade school, there were like two camps of people. There were the nu metal enjoyers, so people who got into Korn around 94, 95. And then there was my crew of people, which were listening to like Spice Girls and that kind of stuff. And so I didn't really make the swap over until all the people that were into nu metal swapped over to rap. And so there was I was behind the curve, but I stuck with heavy music since, right? But really for me, the first, the significant other moment was the moment when Nookie came out, post Columbine. That's when I was like, okay, heavy music is here.
Was it the fusion that kind of got you interested?
I think it might be. And actually looking back on it, as a spoiler for what we're about to talk about, listening back to the Limp Bizkit record, I was like, there's way more fusion on this than I think people appreciate. And I'm like, I think this is what does it, because I still like fusion genres.
Yeah,
right?
It would make sense for you to be drawn to all the different elements of the album.
Yeah, because it's not boring. We can say whatever we want about the quality of the record.
Sure.
It is dynamic, shockingly so, going back to listen to it. But that's kind of where I started with nu metal, going from Britpop, girl pop to Limp Bizkit and everything that follows, right?
That's how you do it.
That's how you do it, I guess, maybe. How did you get into nu metal in this era, not 1999?
I have no idea how I made it here. I'm just as lost as you are. No, I'm kidding. I think I remember the first record I bought with my babysitting money. I'm 13 years old, going into those record shops, and I buy Elephant by the White Stripes.
Okay.
I don't know what drew me into this album, but I did it, and I think ever since then I kind of fell in love with anything that's alternative sounding, anything that's grungy, dirty, fun, anything different. I guess I wanted to be different so bad.
Okay.
And I think from there I slowly started getting into more rock music, but I always loved rap, R&B, and it goes back to the whole fusion thing. I think it's the idea that it's so dynamic and it mixes in so many things, specifically my two favorite genres, rap and rock and metal, and it just feels like me.
Right.
It's chaotic, it's unapologetic, it's uncomfortable. It only appeals to a certain crowd, but that's what I liked about it. I like it, and I don't mind that other people don't. So I guess it kind of falls into a bit of a superiority complex in a way, but it was still so cool to me. It made sense.
It's interesting that you say it only appeals to a certain crowd, because this is where the real difference is between us, because Nookie was the biggest track of its time, and it really it changed the way metal fans looked, right? There's an interview with Fred Durst talking about how he was a bullied kid, and he would look out into the crowd after a few years of playing, and for some reason all the people that he associated with bullying him when he was a kid now just looked like him, because they took up his style with the cap and the sideburns and the soul patch, and the little beard thing. And that has to be a really surreal moment, but two, nu metal was the genre for a long time.
Yeah.
Between 98 to 2002, it had this 4-year run of this is kind of what people are into. It is the baseline.
I'd say we've reached that point now. I'd say more 2023, 2024, we're there. But before 2019, 2020, I'd say it was more of the feeling shameful about it. I was not allowed on aux at any party. Anytime I'm in a car, they knew, they were keep your Spotify off. Please don't play your music.
Oh, it's not even welcome in the playlist.
No. It's still a bit mocked now. But I think as other genres are getting popular, we're finding the similar traits. Alternative rap is getting popular, and bands like Deftones, which we will talk about later on, as they're getting more popular, people, I guess, are understanding why we're drawn to nu metal. They're seeing elements that they like in other genres come together into one.
Yeah.
Still bullied, but not as much as I used to be.
Right. Yeah, this was like a la Fred Durst, the listeners of nu metal in 1999 became the bulliers, right? Whereas like in the early years of nu metal, when Korn was like the largest band doing it, you know, it was still in that bullied position. But this is why Significant Other is so important, is that it became like the turning point. But then also, as they declined, the nu metal left its apex, Limp Bizkit also became like the focal point of the haters again. And like, the album we're about to talk about today, I had not listened to in 22 years, right? Like, and it's not, I actually had no real opinions on it other than, I'm not going to listen to that. Why would I put that on? It's Limp Bizkit. No.
I don't want to do that.
We don't do that. Exactly. It's a meme. It's break stuff, right?
That's the thing. It's a meme.
Yeah. And I think that's unfair because it was a huge cultural moment. Nu metal is back. And it's not just a meme. These records were about things, even if the things they were about, maybe not always the best things, but they're not non-entities.
They're not lacking substance.
Yeah, they're not lacking substance. Just their substance is of questionable character at times.
Definitely questionable.
Or incoherence, like incoherent positions. And that's what I find really interesting about the genre, going back and listening to these records and Significant Other. But before we get into that record, I want to talk a little bit about how are we thinking about the genre of nu metal? Because in the present day, I've been going on all these forums, looking at how people are talking about what nu metal is versus like rap rock versus industrial. And from the 1998 to 2002 perspective, it kind of was just all the nu metal scene. Rob Zombie, Limp Bizkit, Korn, System of a Down, and then, you know, your Evanescences, your Disturbs, all these bands that were kind of like the second wave, they were all just nu metal too. Yeah. And now I think it's changed a little bit. But to me, nu metal was that whole moment. And so that's how we're going to kind of set our parameters for this podcast. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think I'd say the same thing, honestly. It feels like even if our generation is slowly getting into it, it's still seen as a moment, like as an era. It's not just the genre itself, but more like what did people think? Like, what did people dress like? Yeah. Like, even the movies people watched.
For sure.
I feel like it's so, like, anything that's linked to being in that subculture is what nu metal is. It's way beyond, like, how the music is actually made, what the lyrics are about, like, how the guitar sounds. Like, I feel like it's so, like, beyond that.
Yeah. It's the whole cultural apparatus around the nu metal moment. And so, you know, for later episodes, if you're like, is this band really nu metal? Well, they were there, right? And I like to think of the Family Values tour as like this barometer where you had Korn, Limp Bizkit, you had Incubus, Rob Zombie was supposed to be on it, and Ice Cube was on the tour as well. And this was nu metal. Like, this is what it was. It was this fusion genre that I think people forget was this really important fusion at the time. There's a cultural crossover between rap, hard rock, metal, and like that's what it is.
It's a vibe.
It's a vibe. Mm-hmm. There's no better way to say it than that.
It's a vibe.
All right. So let's get into this record. Mm-hmm. Limp Bizkit's Significant Other, which was released on June 22nd, 1999. And why this record is important. Well, this really was the mainstreaming of nu metal. Nu metal was popular. Korn was big, but this hit critical mass with the Nookie video in particular. And then, you know, you get into break stuff. You get into the collab with Method Man, which we'll get into in a bit more detail, but that had a music video as well. And it's just like nu metal is here in the mainstream. It is now accessible to everybody, right?
I like that you brought up that this kind of like kickstarted the nu metal popularity, because it's so interesting how even with us, although we have all the albums available at this time, we didn't have to wait for a 1999 release, a 2000 release, a 2001, so on and so forth. We're still kind of following that pattern, because I'd say that like Limp Bizkit kind of kickstarted everything. Like that's what kind of got really popular. Like we started dressing up like Fred, and people started making jokes about like break stuff and Nookie on TikTok. Like those are the two most popular sounds that are like used from Significant Other. So I think that that's really interesting that we too kind of follow along with what kickstarted back then, and we're using that to kickstart our own interest.
We're going to use this moment as like, this is not the beginning of nu metal, but it is that critical moment. And the reason why is really, if you look at the guest features on this record, you have Jonathan Davis from Korn, who was instrumental in getting Limp Bizkit their position, their record deal, all of that. You have Method Man from the Wu-Tang Clan is on the track. You have Scott Weiland from the Stone Temple Pilots representing kind of the second wave of grunge, but this legitimizing act from like the prior heavy countercultural genre. And you have Les Claypool, the bass player and leader of Primus, which lends an air of technical credibility. He shows up right at the end on a bonus track, but all of these folks coming together on this record are effectively saying Limp Bizkit represents the sum total of this cultural moment on this album. To everyone who's guesting on this, who's doing a guest feature, this matters. Now, what is the shape of this thing that matters is a more interesting question. So I listened to this thing. We each did this, a blind listen, and then we did a close listen of this record. And so I'm actually going to start with you here. Have you ever heard this before now?
So you'll find that I'm doing this with all of the albums that we're talking about. I think I know a couple of the songs, some of the popular ones, some of the less popular ones, but I don't think I've ever done like a from the beginning to the end, a full listen, let alone twice within the same like hour.
Yeah.
So it was definitely interesting to like feel like I'm understanding the band a little more and understanding like, oh, that makes so much sense that like Nookie would get popular, or like this song kind of represents them. But there's this song that's also very like it touches on the same topics, but it's not as popular. So I was kind of engaging with the record in that way.
Yeah, that's great. What was your first impressions of listening to Significant Other all the way through?
It sounded like me in the summer wearing jorts. Like it sounded like it. I feel like I'm very visual in the way that I like, even with music, that I interpret music. And it was so interesting because, you know, like I still grew up with like these movies and this media, but hearing it, and I don't know, like it feels like it took me back to a time that I wasn't really like alive during, but still like I felt like I belonged, like it still made sense. And I guess since I also like the genre, that adds to it. Like I think that if I had asked anyone else to do this, they would have been like, this is torture, like what are we doing? But to me it was just like the electronic sounds and like the DJ like record scratches. Exactly. Like it was so like it was mixing a bunch of things that like I hear now that I didn't hear back then. And I don't know, like it feels like timeless in a way. And I feel like a lot of people would maybe disagree with that, but to me I'm like, it has so many elements that are found today in such a natural way. Like it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like, I don't know, like it feels natural.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So my listen of this, I have way more baggage going back to it because there's like the day you quit nu metal cold turkey and you just moved on to quote genres that were good. So you got more into hardcore, you got more into extreme metal, because this version of nu metal is kind of and I don't mean this as like a mark of quality, but like mid in the sense that it's in the middle. It is aggressive but accessible.
Literally mid.
Right? It is angry but it's party rock. It's all of those things together. And, you know, being in an extreme band as a young man in the post-nu metal age, and me and my other musicians, you would really avoid anything that sounds like this. Like you'd put it on and be like, this is new, in that it's nu metal. And you would not listen to it anymore. So this was just an easy thing to not listen to again. And so I put this thing on with all of that baggage of being like, here we go. And I was like, this is actually pretty good.
Like, why were we hating on this?
Why are we hating? Well, there are reasons to hate on this, but like the aesthetics of it, how heavy it is and how funky it is across the whole thing. And also it's dynamic. I really thought because there's this thing in nu metal records where you have like, there's two modes. They're playing the loudest they possibly can, and they're doing that weird, eerie, quiet part that's usually a bridge near the end of the song. And those are all over this, but there's also more. Like, I think this is the bass player and Wes Borland, the guitar player, much to their credit, they do some funky stuff that makes it not sound like an average nu metal record, where there are some records that we're going to talk about in this season that I do think only have those two dynamic ranges. And I really expected that this was going to have the same problem. And it did not. I was listening to this and I got to like track 5 and I was like, oh my God, is this actually good? Aside from one complaint that bothered me throughout the whole record on the first listen through, which is anytime Fred Durst is singing, it is not working for me.
Completely agree.
And that's really the only thing that's going wrong. Like, you can say what you would like about his rapping, whether it's to your taste or not, but especially given the era, I was like, Fred Durst, white guy rapping on this isn't the worst thing I've ever heard.
It's really not bad, like bar-wise, like flow-wise.
It's cheesy. Like, some of his lyrical choices are not amazing. And again, there's not a lot of insight in his bars, but I get it. Listening back to it, I fully understood why this record took off, and also why all their peers that guested on this record were like, yeah, this is the moment. Completely understanding what this is. Okay, that was our first listen. So let's get into the close listen, some detail about what we heard on this thing. Safa, for you, what was on your listen back? What was like the first thing that stood out to you? With any detail here, whether it's a track, a lyric.
He's angry.
He's angry, sure.
He's angry, but like in a way that it's like, I don't care, but I care so much, but like I don't care. Like that's like the vibe I was getting. And I didn't want to do this, like writing down all my notes about it. Like I didn't want to go back to break stuff because like it feels expected.
Right.
But it really is that, like it's just one of those days, man. Mm-hmm. Like he's like kicking the floor, like in his like Supras. Like it just feels very like, he's just like angry and annoyed, and I kind of love it. Like it's like not whiny necessarily, but it feels like he's perfectly describing how he feels in an entertaining way. And although, like you said, sometimes the lyrics are very like, I don't know, like it makes no sense maybe, but like, okay, for example, And Together Now with Method Man, like, yeah. And take another life in cold blood, can't feel me till it's your blood, like bringing up gang violence, let's say in a song, but like you're too distracted by like once again the DJ scratches. Right. So it's interesting. Like, I don't know, I found it engaging, but you could either connect to the lyrics or disconnect a bit and still enjoy the way it sounds.
Oh, that's a good point. The way this is written, basically any lyrics that he's dropping in is like take it or leave it. You can hook onto whatever part of this you want. And it's really interesting because the lyrics are always directed at someone, but either in a way that they're putting you in Fred's position as the protagonist of the songs that he's writing about, as his buddy in a position of relatability. Like you get why I'm angry. You either are me and you are angry, or you're with me and you get why I'm angry, or he'll say like, I'm against you, you are the adversary, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that he's doing on this record. It's very much you're me, you're with me, or you're against me.
It's all relatable.
This album. And it is relatable.
It's easy to listen. Like trust, for example. I don't trust nobody because nobody trusts me. Never going to trust anybody. And that's the way it's going to be. Super simple.
Yeah.
He's talking like he doesn't trust these people, But it's like I could listen to that and be like, yeah, you're right. I don't trust those people. Like that's just what it feels like. It feels relatable enough.
I'm going to talk about this now because I had those lyrics written down as well. And I'm like, these are both like aggressive statements recorded as party rock anthems. And they're just kind of mottos of the moment, of distrust, anger, frustration, all of these things combined into we're all this way together, but I'm also completely alone, right? So I think the record has a thesis. I think it exists. And this is where nu metal is interesting to me, is this record in particular. The bridge on Nookie, the biggest track off this record, and nothing gonna change, you can go away, I'm just gonna stay here and always be the same. Repeated 3 times in a row, right? It was just kind of like a cold resignation to being stagnant in terms of your emotional development, in terms of your accountability. I'm just going to stay here and I'm always going to be the same.
Unapologetic.
Unapologetic. I will not learn. I will not get better. But I am going to write a 63-minute album about how pissed I am.
Yeah.
But I will not change as a result of these feelings. I will just express them. But the most important part is he has that pretty extreme statement, right? Like if you take that and actually put it in a poem, it's actually quite affecting to be like, I've just been through all this stuff and I don't care. I am me and I will be this way.
It's super
from
emotional.
Now until the end of time. Very stubborn, but also kind of, in some ways, it's a really beautiful admission of flaws. Like I'm admitting my flaws. Into the immediate next line is the chorus, I did it all for the nookie, right? And so you have, throughout this entire record, the juxtaposition of surprisingly insightful statements about Fred Durst, the vocalist's own psyche, cut to, I did it all for the nookie, you can take that cookie and stick it up your yeah. And so the lyrical pattern of the entire record, if you break it down, if you go through Fred Durst's cognition, is self-loathing, to I'm angry about it, to let's party, to F you, whoever you is at that given moment. And that just kind of repeats. Not in any given song, but basically the overall arc across tracks is that same pattern.
I feel like it's perfect for a listener because you don't want to stay too sad. Like, you don't want to dwell too much on the bad stuff,
right.
Although it's the truth and it's like the reality, whether it was back in 1999 or like today.
Yeah.
But so you're getting into it and you're like, yeah, this is serious. These are like hard hitting topics, but also like you said, party rock. Like it mixes well. Like it never lets you stick into one emotion. And that's what I think I appreciate about it. Right. Whether it's on purpose or not, whether it's supposed to be funny, it kind of ends up being funny while still being serious a bit. And I think that it goes back to the whole, like, it's dynamic, it's engaging. Like, I don't know, it doesn't feel stagnant, you know?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't feel, the record doesn't feel stagnant in spite of him saying that I will be, ultimately. But there's this frenetic energy in the stagnation. And I don't know if it's just like the cycle of like, I'm going to make me forget how bad I feel until this exciting part is over and then I will feel bad again. But if that doesn't encapsulate the depressive mindset, I don't know what does really. Like, it is that loop, right? I don't know. And that kind of resonates. Now, the thing that also stuck out to me is that you could channel all that anger into like an effective political position or making social statements about things where you want them to change. And this is just flying in all directions. I have very little definitive point of view on what it is he's actually mad at, other than some combination of his friends who owe him money, authority generally conceived. Like, I don't think he cares about a particular political party, certainly not in 1999.
Not at that time.
No, not at all. It's just any authority is not good. Women, the concept of women on this record have basically like this binary opposite position, which is like, hey ladies, is on this record multiple times where they're talking about women get naked, we do it all for the nookie. And then also, in one of the tracks we'll talk about in a minute, is really kind of this incel track.
I don't think he really knows either. It's either he doesn't know or he knows and he just is like kind of tired of repeating it by the time you get to the middle of the album. Because I'm so glad you brought up like he's just bringing up a bunch of stuff. Right. Because in Rearranged, one of the lyrics is literally, just think about it, you'll get it. And whether he's actually prompting you to think about what he's saying or what you're thinking, there's this collective understanding of, yeah, I'm mad. I might not know what I'm mad about, or I might know exactly what I'm mad about, but like, we get it. We understand each other. I think it's just, I'm going to channel this energy. Sometimes it's going to make sense. Sometimes it's not, but I'm just pissed. Whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can read that too. Is all this seems like substanceless. He's undirected with his anger, but it's also, you could take it as like, this is a person trying to work through his feelings in modern society in 1999, because it doesn't really make sense and things just don't really feel well, which is maybe why this works now. Is like, things are confusing, we do all these things that don't make sense, and just, I don't know, people are lashing out all over the place,
and we get it.
Yeah, we do get it. It's just, anger. So I found a review of this record from when it came out by David Brown. This was for EW, Entertainment Weekly, published on my birthday, June 18th, 1999, just a few days before I heard this record for the first time. Check this out. Durst may be a successful rock star with a platinum debut album, but that doesn't stop him from playing the rock and roll underdog, the guy who feels constantly hammered, suppressed, and taken advantage of, and who uses his band's melding of jackhammer metal and bellicose rap as an outlet for that frustration. As harsh as this may sound, you can't help but think that Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, the Columbine Shooters, may have been huge Limp Bizkit fans. As Durst sings in a lighter moment, upholding a time-honored sentiment, music is key. It's the way we're set free from all this world is throwing at me. But overall, Significant Other isn't simply modern rock. It's postmodern rock. Significant Other isn't disturbing because of Durst's stance or feelings. It's because bands like Limp Bizkit represent the future of rock. And what a future. A music and sensibility that's agitated, angry, hostile, wary, and devoid of much nuance. This type of music always existed, but it usually bubbled under the charts. Now it's the mainstream, and it makes you wonder if rock's forever lost that loving feeling. And he gave it a B. What do you think?
I don't know. Sometimes, once again, this is how I'm understanding it from my perspective now, like just getting into new metal. But it feels like sometimes, even when people are talking about new metal while they were at the like peak, the like height of its popularity, they also don't really understand what it is. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it just feels like even people are kind of trying to understand what's going on. And with that confusion kind of comes a bit of like, they're either super interested in it or they're like confused and not wanting to get into it.
Right. Other genres of more extreme music like don't really have this because you're not getting like hard metal reviews in Entertainment Weekly. Like all the bands from the hardcore scene, except for like maybe the breakthrough bands like Hatebreed or something, like they're just not engaging with this. It's too far. It's not in the zeitgeist. It doesn't matter. Whereas new metal bridged and it put high gain, really heavily compressed, loud drums, guy yelling, rap yelling, talking, whatever this vocal styling is out there. And so it had to be reckoned with because it was mainstream enough. And yeah, maybe that's just it's people forced to reckon with a thing they're not really interested in terms of an aesthetic. And I think that, I mean, you can look at the end of this review, right? It's has rock forever lost that loving feeling? But is that always what was there? Or is this just a factor of the way people feel is actually finally making it into where media can be accessed? The radio station, certainly after grunge, like we had 89X that I mentioned in the intro back in Windsor, Detroit area. And, you know, it went pretty hard at a certain point. Like this is what people wanted, a certain segment of people wanted to be hearing. And I think maybe like you look at who's writing reviews, this is a pretty prestigious guy. Like he teaches at a university, as do I, but I'm a scholar of low culture. This is probably not his wheelhouse. I would imagine. Yeah, I could be wrong, but I get the sense that this is, probably not the kind of thing he would be putting on from day to day. There is another interesting part of this review, which is that he has a favorite track. His favorite track is my least favorite track.
Interesting. It's
called No More Sex, and it has a guest from Aaron Lewis of the band Stained, who we will be taking up on a future episode of the podcast. And I want to talk a little bit about this track because it's now in 2024, it makes more sense to me than it does in 1999. And then in the context of the record, it's just really incoherent as a track. But you had a take on this as well, which before I get into my deep dive on this track, would you like to express your feelings?
Just before I get into that, I'm still so shocked that was his favorite track.
Yeah, it made honestly. No sense. I read that and it was I was taken aback.
Mm-hmm. Even like me, and I mentioned this in my notes, I'm saying here, I quote myself, maybe I'm missing something, ... but this might be my least favorite track, LOL.
Yeah. Like, what made it your least favorite track?
Honestly, I think when I separated it into like a surface level listen, it's kind of funny and uncomfortable, like how he's singing about it. I didn't like the sing-songy vibe personally. And then I'm getting into the lyrics and I'm just like, what's actually like going on? Like I screenshotted, not my favorite, but the most like, I was interested in this part. Wait, it's my ass and your perfume. They make temptation hard to refuse. So I guess we undress to have sex? Dirty sex?
Yeah. Which they're upset about, Fred and Aaron on this track. So the thesis of this track is effectively that Fred's sexual partner should have denied him sex because afterwards he is brainless. And so this causes him to lose respect for his sexual partner and himself? ?
make it make sense.
This is also on a record with lyrics like, just watch the ground move, let the sound prove that it ain't fake when the girls get naked. The thing that all the anger and rage is trying to achieve for a lot of this record seems to be when the girls get naked, right? Quoting from the song, right? But also, when the girls get naked, I, Fred Durst, feel like shit. But it's their fault.
It's their fault that I feel bad.
That's the weird part about this record, it's fully in line with that self-loathing theme, but it's not blaming himself. It's just it's you.
That's what I didn't like. Obviously, I don't expect any less from new metal records, to be honest, in the sense that when I tap into the side of me that is still like, a feminist and like a girl in the 21st century, where I'm just like, you've got this album where you're talking about, being upset at the world and yourself and like, oh, you're a reject. And that falls under this list of things to be upset about, to feel rejected by. Right. I'm just like, no. But.
And it's just so. Yeah. Across this record, there is this like proto-incel vibe.
Definitely.
That is also mixed into this incoherent soup of like a teenage boys' room crossed with a strip club is what I've described a couple of, like, in my notes. I was like, half of the songs on here have that vibe. Like, that's the aesthetic, right? Combined with a public freakout. Like, it's those things mixed together. And I'm like, how does this fit into all this? But again, reading it from now, because that's me trying to figure this out in 1999, when it's like, just do a party, just be party rock. Like, that's what you're doing anyway. This makes perfect sense for the era. But now I'm like, it's like an incel anthem, like way ahead of its time.
And having like other people like validate it like so openly and stuff.
But it's also like a flag that this was already here.
Yeah.
It's just,
that's true,
wasn't taken up in the same cultural spaces. The place to get it was on your Limp Bizkit record, right? Safa, do you have any final points on Limp Bizkit's Significant Other as a starting point of this podcast?
I think it was a great way to open up the doors for the rest of this conversation, honestly. And I'm excited and scared for what's to come.
Yeah, I think the beauty of new metal and this the confluence that is Significant Other is that none of the other records on our list actually sound like this or are about the same things in the same way. And I think we might assume that new metal is a really shallow genre. It's certainly confused at times. It seems incoherent, but the artists are processing something, and this was what people were listening to, and people are coming back to this.
They like what they like.
They like what they like, and we like what we like. And even though I somewhat enjoyed my revisiting of Limp Bizkit's Significant Other, I may never listen to it again.
And that's okay.
It's better than okay. It's healthy. Well, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Sonic Subcultures Season 1. This podcast is produced by Mark Lajeunesse and Safa Hachi in conjunction with the Media History Research Center at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada.